All right, Select Board, if you join me at the table, we'll get underway. And Town Manager and Town Attorneys, please. Here, I'll go one more over. Just join, why don't we slide these people down?
I know. It's like
I
night
don't think
club.
anyone would take offense.
I'm glad those aren't.
Oh, no, town moderator is not coming. It's way down there. David Garcia. Hey, John. It's a little cozy. And they're a little low, yeah.
We just couldn't put it together. No, I haven't been on since last week, which is really
Step through the whole board. I hadn't planned to go article by article, but I can.
I mean, it might give some structure to it.
Okay.
I think this article was last year or the year before that we did that as an agricultural.
Okay.
Even though there's no questions on
Yeah.
this.
Thanks. This is Nell, who's at Academy School.
Nels Academy.
She's on her way. I do know.
Yeah, I want a bigger one. I want a bigger one. This is especially new.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the town meeting informational session. I'm Oscar Heller. I'm the chair of the Select Board. Joining me at the table are select members Isaac, Amanda, and Peter. And Nell went to Academy School, so she's on her way. Also joining us, Town Manager John Potter and Town Attorneys Hannah Clarice and Bob Fisher. Thank you all for coming. Welcome. The purpose of today's meeting is an informational session where all of you can ask us questions about things that are going to be on the warning for town meeting so that you can have all the information you need when we actually debate issues on Saturday. In addition to us, there's department heads are here, the town moderator is here, and a number of other town staff. So we may direct your questions around to the appropriate person as you ask them. I do want to thank BCTV for broadcasting and recording this informational session. And a reminder that, of course, the actual town meeting is this Saturday, April 11th, at the high school at 8:30 a.m. And John, I believe 8 a.m. is the earliest arrival?
Yes, 8 a.m. the doors will be open and people can check in.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to go over a couple minor points and briefly review the process that got us here, and then most of this meeting will just be questions asked by you guys, answered to the best of our ability by us. We're going to step through the warrant for Saturday, one article at a time, and we'll have questions on one article and then move on to the next. So to briefly review the budget process specifically, because that's a big part of what we're going to be talking about. The way that went this year is we held an annual retreat in August as a select board to set high-level priorities. We had an initial listening session with the public on September 11th, received a draft budget from town staff on November 4th, and had a second public listening session on November 12th. Then we heard department presentations November 18th, December 2nd, and December 16th. Had budget revision meetings of the board on January 13th, 22nd, 27th, and then approved the budget on January 27th. And the other articles that are in the warning were approved for open town meeting on March 10th. Couple other points I want to mention are just the documents that you have. There are copies of the annual report at the table, as well as an addendum to the town report with some extra stuff. The addendum contains the Finance Committee report, the general fund budget summary, the capital plan for this year, and the warning for this town meeting. Because we weren't sure what we were going to have, the annual report includes a warning for a representative town meeting in the beginning. That one is superseded by the one in the packet, so you can ignore that part of the annual report. There's a lot of great info in this report. The part I expect people will most refer to is the actual budget itself, which starts on page 132. And that's where you can find every single thing broken down by department, broken down by line item. Okay, so I want to set a few basic ground rules and just sort of explain how this is going to go. Like I said, I'm going to go through the warning one article at a time, and I'll ask people to raise their hands who want to speak and ask a question about something related to that article specifically. You can see the warning on page 7 of the extra packet, and there are 16 articles that we'll go through. Some are really simple, some will take longer. As far as organizing how this goes, when I call on you, please come to one of the 2 microphones in the center aisle, and if you have questions, please direct them to me as chair, and I will play traffic cop and pass them along to the appropriate people. And then the big thing to keep in mind for tonight is that this is the informational session. This is not town meeting itself, so the purpose for today is a chance to ask factual information questions of the board and town staff. We'll do our best to give you answers on the fly. If not, we may follow up, but this is not a meeting to have debate or to state a position or to make an argument. All of that needs to wait until Saturday. And so if you begin to make an argument for something, I will politely stop you and ask you to stick to factual questions only. And it's not because I don't agree with the argument or because I don't want to hear it, but just because that's not the purpose of this meeting. And we really want everyone at town meeting to hear your arguments on Saturday. So with that said, we're going to move into the warning, but first I'd like to ask Amanda. Millicent Cooley has a cold and can't make it, so Amanda is going to share some information about the community dependent care program that was put together for Saturday.
Yes, it's with a lot of gratitude that I want to invite anyone that's seeking reimbursement for dependent care on town meeting to pick up a form at the town clerk's table. There will be limited kind of supervision of that, but we're asking actually if any individual in the audience tonight might be willing to take a shift just to oversee that little stack of forms. And I'm just going to read the press release that Millicent created. Dependent care reimbursement forms for the Brattleboro Town Meeting will be available at Brattleboro Union High School gymnasium near the clerk's table. So I guess look for them. Funds are limited and not guaranteed for everyone who makes a request. This is managed in partnership with United Way, and it was possible through community members' initiative and funding.
Thank you, Amanda. Okay, so we're going to move into the warning, which again is on page 7 of the extra packet. And I'll read each article or a summary of it, and then anyone who has informational questions about that, which could be, can you give us a number for this? Can you give me more information about what something else might mean? You might have a procedural question about how to do something at the meeting. The town moderator, David Gartenstein, is present, and he can answer questions about that. So we'll start with Article 1, which is a simpler one, which is to see if the town will ratify, approve, and confirm the Select Board's appointment of a town clerk for a term of 1 year. Is there anyone who has a question about Article 1? Please raise your hand. Okay, seeing no questions. And if I move ahead and you see someone with their hand up, please stop me. But seeing no questions, Article 2. To see if the town will ratify, approve, and confirm the Select Board's appointment of a town treasurer for a term of 1 year. Does anyone have a question on this article? Seeing none. Article 3, to see if the town will ratify, approve, and confirm the Select Board's appointment of a town attorney for a term of 1 year. Anyone have a question about this article? Not seeing one. Article 4, to see if the town will authorize its Select Board to borrow money in anticipation of taxes, grants, and other revenue. Any questions about Article 4? And I should have said up front, some of you may be new to Brattleboro Town Meeting. Some of you may have been representatives in previous years, but we really do invite your questions. So please don't feel like we're going to judge you for not knowing something or anything like that. If you have a question, please put your hand up and we'll get you an answer. Yes, no bad questions, exactly. Okay, Article 5. I'm not going to read every word of it, but to see if the town will raise and appropriate the sum, maybe I will, of $131,698.86 through special assessments on property within the Mountain Home Special Benefit Assessment Tax District as approved by town meeting March 24th, 2007, and as delineated in the town ordinance entitled Municipal Act to establish and regulate the Mountain Home Park Special Benefit Assessment Tax District for the purpose of paying debt service on the capital improvements to the water and sewer lines serving the Mountain Home and Deepwood Mobile Home Parks. Does anyone have a question about Article 5? Yes, sir. And just come up to the microphone if you don't mind. This will let the people watching online hear your question, and just state your name up front.
Please just define what the tax district is. What are the boundaries of it? I don't understand what that is.
Sure.
I can try that.
Sure, or we can toss it to someone if you prefer.
Yeah, I think it's just the Mountain Home Park, the residences in Mountain Home Park that are benefiting from the sewer and water project that was done a number of years ago.
Okay, seeing no other questions, I'll move to Article 6. To see if the town will raise and appropriate the sum of $80,000 through special assessments on properties within the Downtown Improvement District to be used for capital and operating costs of projects of the town's duly designated downtown organization. Any questions on Article 6? Seeing none, we'll move ahead. And I'll just note from previous town meetings, both of the amounts in those articles do not affect our budget. They are pass-throughs or other mechanisms, and they do not, changing those numbers wouldn't change our taxes. I guess that's a good way of looking at it. Okay, Article 7. To see how much money the town will raise, appropriate, and expend to defray all of its expenses and liabilities in addition to any funds authorized for any other articles in these warnings. And this, I think we will have questions. This is the big budget article where everything on page 132 and onward in the book, all of that goes in this one sentence. So are there any questions for Article 7? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Ellen Schwartz, District 8. So I read the Finance Committee's recommendations, and I saw that I was looking at the part about paved roads, and they were recommending an increase in what the town is spending on our paved roads. And what my question is that part of this budget, or is it somewhere else? And I don't think the town meeting can vote to increase a particular line item in the budget. So if someone like me has a concern about our paved roads, where does that fit in this meeting on Saturday?
Great, thank you. That's a great question, and I think it bundles up a couple other general points. So this budget does include $550,000 for road paving. The Finance Committee report recommends increasing that amount by at least a couple $100,000. So this would be the article to increase that amount. Now, the longstanding practice is that town meeting does not have the authority to bind the select board to change a specific line item. So it would not be permitted to amend this article and say, you must put $300,000 more into roads. The practice has been to amend the total number of the budget and then include a sort of advisory suggestion to the select board that that's what town meeting wants the money to be used for. And historically, those suggestions have always or almost always been honored by the select board. So the procedure on Saturday would be for someone to stand up and say, if they wanted to increase spending on roads by $300,000, they would amend certain numbers in the sample motion that you see below Article 7. And for example, they would say, instead of a sum not to exceed $27,040,801, they would say $27,340,801 with a direction to the select board that this money is intended for XYZ. So this is, the big answer is yes, this is the article where you would make that change to the budget, and that's the procedure. Great, thank you. Other questions on Article 7? Yes, Ernie. Great, thank you. If that's, I happily accept your correction. 500,000, not 550. Anyone else with a question about Article 7? Bob.
Good evening, Bob Ozer. There's a question that's been floating around. During the past budget cycle, I believe, there were 3 additional sworn officers added to the police force because of an emergency in the downtown area. And so the question is, what was the total cost of that increase in staffing? And by total, I mean not only salaries, but benefits and training and certification and all the rest of that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So those officers, the cost of those officers fully loaded with all benefits is approximately $91,600 each. And so, as you noted, there were 3 officers, so that's in the neighborhood of $275,000 for the ability to have a downtown presence.
Thanks, John. Any further questions? Kate?
Hi, everybody. I'm Kate O'Connor. My question is, as proposed, the budget is a 6.3% tax increase over last year. What does that equal in dollar amounts, like per $150,000 or $100,000 per home value? You know, usually every year we get, oh, that means it's a $260 increase. You know what I'm saying? We get this number every single year, and I do not see it anywhere what that dollar figure is. Am I making sense?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
If we can't get that right now, we can certainly calculate that and have it ready by Saturday or sooner, unless somebody wants to do some back of the envelope math, but I won't blame anyone for saying no.
Yeah, I can search around and see if I can find it while we're going on to other questions. But generally, whatever we come up with for that is truly an estimate because we don't have all the information yet to know exactly what that would be. But we can try to get as close an estimate as possible, and I'll either try to find it now or we can have something at town meeting to that effect. I broke it. It's back. Okay, great.
we're doing some figuring here, but I think following up in the next couple days is probably the safest approach, but we can get that for you, absolutely. Other questions on Article 7? Yes, please.
Rachel Dissler, District 9. I'm just curious if you could shed a little light on or kind of give a quick explanation. I noticed sort of consistently in the budget details across the board, the difference between the FY26 budget and FY27 select board budget, and what is the and as well as the FY26 actuals. And I'm curious how you're arriving at those differences, and are we talking about this is sort of the proposed amounts in the FY27 select board budget, or are those the amounts requested by the different departments? Does that make sense?
I think so. You're asking about the 3 columns in the budget detail in the annual report, FY27 select board budget, FY26 budget, and FY26 actuals?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Noticing that consistently the FY27 is significantly higher, and just sort of give a little context to why it's so much higher, kind of across the board.
That's a big question that we'll do our best to answer. Certainly one part of it is that the FY26 actuals are going to be low because that year's in progress. So these are partial actuals. But when you're comparing budget to budget, yeah, anywhere you see a percentage change or a dollar change that's going up, that's something that has gone up by that amount. If you go department by department, something I probably should have mentioned up front is that the benefits have all been split. They used to be just one big benefits section, so they have all been moved to their respective departments. So, for example, the fire department's expenses have gone up by 49%, but a lot of that is because health insurance and other benefits got moved into that section. So that's one reason why some of the numbers look sort of surprisingly big. Other questions on Article 7? Yes, Andy, please.
Andy Davis. You just referenced 6.3% increase, but in the printed budget, I see the number 8.3. Could you just explain that's on both revenue and expense, and just why the discrepancy there? Thank you.
I think are you referring to the difference between the increase in the current taxes line, which I believe is 6.3%, and the overall expenses or revenues, which is 8.6? So it's just all that represents is that not all of the revenues that go towards the expenses are from property taxes. They're also from a number of other revenue sources.
Thanks, John. And for anyone following along, if you want to see just the change in property taxes, on page 132, maybe about 10 or 12 line items down, you'll see current taxes, and you can see the change and the 6.3% increase there. Other questions on Article 7? Andy?
Could you speak to why the article on the municipal budget is in the articles before the consideration of the human services budget, which has sort of been pushed off like a distant cousin with a $1 reference? And why would that come second? You know, what was the thinking behind as you prepared these articles? Because I know there's a lot of people in town that would like to see us continue a long-standing practice of including human service spending, and what's the thinking about putting that second? Thank you.
Sure, and I'm happy, this is something we all had a discussion about and a vote on at the board level, so any board members who'd like to give their own answer are welcome to. Speaking just for myself, I heard arguments both ways, and in the end, didn't feel like I was leaving it second as some sort of consequential decision. It was more just that it had to go in some order. And it is worth, this is a good point, a good place to mention that whatever the budget is set at, Article 8 is a separate appropriation. So it's not like you're locking in a budget at Article 7 and then cannot change Article 8. The total expenditures for the town will be whatever number we end at in 7 plus whatever we end at in 8. But if any other board members have a comment on that process, they're welcome to. And at any point.
This on? I'm Isaac Evans France. I think the thinking behind this was that we wanted to look at human services spending in the context of our overall spending as a town, in terms of looking at the whole budget and not as an isolated expenditure, but thinking about the overall impact on taxpayers.
Thanks, Isaac. Any other questions on Article 7? Well, then I'm going to tentatively move ahead to Article 8. Article 8 is to see if the town will raise and appropriate the sum of $1 for the support of social service programs and facilities within the town to be allocated as recommended by the Human Services Committee, as appointed by the Select Board and approved by the Select Board. Questions on Article 8? Yes, Frick?
Frick Sprite, District 9. Your suggestion that the board would has historically honored changes to the major budget, Article 7 in this case, is inconsistent with what you did with Article 8 and the amount, because the town meeting actually did give a number specifically for this purpose, which was a little bit more than $1. And I'd like to know why the board in its infinite wisdom decided to ignore town meeting specific instructions on this issue and this specific article. And I'd like to ask a follow-up question, which is how you propose to divide $1 among the various agencies that were applying for some of this money.
Thank you, Frick. I'm going to suggest that the path we arrived at to get at this number, I'm happy to be corrected, but that the path we arrived at to get to this number is a matter of public record. It happened at a number of select board meetings, votes were taken, and I'm not sure retreading that ground gives people more informational clarity on Saturday when they debate over what the number should be. The reason it's $1 is because the board voted for $0, and our lawyers advised us that it has to be some sort of positive number, and the reason it's a number in there at all is so that town meeting has the opportunity now to change it to any number they see fit. So while I take your point on the first part and think it's well made, I'm not sure it feels drifting into realms of argument to me.
I would beg to differ. We are covering things that are a matter of public record through the entire warning tonight. Mm-hmm. This is the final review before meetings. When we're all here, theoretically, hopefully more people will show up for town meeting. Hopefully more people are watching online. But this is actually an article that we did vote on at town meeting. And so I'm trying to hear from all of you how it is that we get from something that was actually ratified by town meeting to this, which clearly is inconsistent with it. So that, I really want an explanation in this venue.
I appreciate that. Thank you. The quick, brief response is that we had a long debate and the board was deeply split and there was a 3-2 vote to reduce it to the current amount. I really don't want to retread every detail of that argument at this moment. I will say that in terms of how we did or did not regard town meeting's past instructions, it's important to note that the vote at town meeting was worded as up to 2%, and that while I may or may not agree with you on what that number should have been put at, I don't think there's anything inconsistent with the vote that was taken at town meeting. No?
We're sharing. Hi. Woo. I think it's worth clarifying because what I take it from Frick saying here is, well, how can town meeting trust that an amendment made to the overall budget article would be honored by the select board in terms of the direction of that amendment being specified through the discussion? Whereas what Frick is referencing with the human services was a different article in terms of town meeting last year voted on the budget, and they voted, to turn it down in our March representative town meeting. And then we had a separate article that was an advisory vote for the impending, the next year for the FY27's budget for human services. And again, while I'm not saying this, I'm not including my personal opinions in this, but there is a difference in terms of if town meeting makes an amendment towards the overall budget, the board is bound to reflect that. And the advisory vote, which we don't have on this warning, does not commit the board in the same way. And so I think that's worth clarifying to understand. And there was a lot of discussion back in January about whether or not there would be a separate article to confirm what the human service spending would be for this budget for FY27. And I think the simplest thing I can say with trying to keep it clear and keep opinions out of it is that the town will have the opportunity to decide what they want to be spent on human services, and that will be binding, and the board won't be able to affect that for the FY27 year. The town will have the opportunity to amend the budget, and that will be binding. And I understand that I think Frick is speaking towards a deterioration of trust between town meeting and the select board. And I think that's a much larger conversation, but one that I believe we're all interested in having and feel committed to. The main point I'm trying to clarify there is that an amendment to the overall budget is not the same as the advisory vote that we had at the end of last year's RTM in March.
Thank you, Nell. And just because I know this is an area that people will ask questions about, and I found confusing for years when I first joined town meeting, if you amend the budget, which is the previous article, the number you amend it to is binding. That becomes our number. What you direct us to do it with is advisory, but we will do it. Any other questions on Article 8? Bob, and yes. Bob first.
You may not want me first, Bob Ozer.
Please.
So, first of all, your indulgence, because I have actually two questions, and one question goes to Article 7, and one goes to Article 8. So do the Article 8 question first, which is there a procedural way to consider Article 8 before Article 7? For the sake of perhaps logic or efficiency, as opposed to numerical consistency. And is that something that the board can do, or is that something that would come from the floor?
Let me ask, good Lord, let me ask the town moderator if you're here, David.
I'm David Gardenstein, Town Meeting Moderator. I wanted to speak to a couple of things, 3 things about the procedure for this coming Saturday, and the potential for switching Articles 7 and 8 is one of those. So we had a question earlier about the relationship between Article 7 and Article 8, being that Article 8, the Human Services funding, is actually going to wind up being part of the full budget for the town and reflected in the tax rate. Given that those questions relate to each other and that human services funding and the budget as a whole are part of a real single question, I'm going to be suggesting at town meeting on Saturday that we convene as what's called a committee of the whole and be able to discuss as a group the budget and the human services articles together. Because the way Robert's rules would currently operate, we'd be talking first about the budget and not talking about human services funding because it's a separate article. And I think that it's going to be way more productive for us to be able to have a full discussion about all those matters financial in nature before moving on to make decision about the budget individually, which is one article, and human services funding, which is a separate article. I'm also going to be suggesting on Saturday that we, during the committee of the whole procedure, try to get to a point where we understand each other's positions about how much human services funding, if any, should be included in Article 8. Last year, for anybody who was at town meeting, you'll recall that there was a wide range of positions about how much human services funding should be included. It ran the gamut, and I think there were 8 or 10 total suggestions. And the way Robert's rules would work, it's very difficult to find out under a strict application of those rules which position has the strongest majority support. We would take a vote during that article, and the first position that had majority support, if we were filling in the blanks like we did last year, would control. And that wasn't the best way to proceed. So I'm going to hope that we can have a discussion, a nuanced discussion, about how much human services funding does the body, in the biggest majority, support. Then, with those 2 things having been addressed, we're going to turn, I hope, if this procedure is adopted without objection or on a vote at town meeting, I hope that we'll then proceed to make a decision about whether to flip the 2 articles, Articles 7 and 8, whether to start with human services or to start with the budget. And that's a procedure that's called suspending the rules, but it's suspending the rules just for the purpose of flipping the articles, because usually we would take Article 7 first and then Article 8. But if everybody believes that it's prudent and logical to begin with the human services funding article, we can make that change, but that's a change that'll happen from the floor.
David, can I ask you a question? So what will this look like on Saturday? You as moderator will move to do certain things?
Once we finish with Article 6, which is the second of the articles about funding from special districts, I'm going to propose to everybody who's in attendance at town meeting that we convene as a committee of the whole so that we can have this discussion about the budget and human services as a whole, and so that we can talk about the human services issues to try to reach that understanding about our views. And if there's no objection to proceeding that way, then we'll be able to just begin that process and have that discussion. There'll be a couple of subsidiary things that go along with that request to clarify how the committee of the whole will work. There are some differences between what we'll do and what's right there in Robert's rules. Then, if we have that discussion, either it'll be by unanimous consent, or if we have to have a vote, we can have a vote if there's objection to it. After that discussion, if we do proceed that way, we would then need to have a vote to suspend the rules if we're going to talk about switching the order of the 2 articles.
Thank you.
If I could speak to what David just proposed, was nearly the exact same thing that I had proposed during a select board meeting when we voted to zero out the budget. All my attempt was to do was to put it into a budgetary conversation so that we knew where our tax rate would wind up, because it just felt irresponsible last year, failing a budget and then adding the human services back into a budget that we had already failed. So the mechanism that I proposed during the meeting that we had was to do exactly what David is trying to kind of execute on Saturday, and which I hope is successful, because it feels like the smartest path forward, so that by the time we reach these votes, we know exactly where we are, and Articles 7 and 8 should just fly right through. I think the biggest part of that debate will be what David is suggesting, and I'm really hoping that we can support that.
Great, thank you, Peter. Yes, who else? I'm sorry, in the back with the mask.
Ellen Schwartz, District 8, and I have a procedural question that I'll address to you, but it's probably for David.
Great.
So if we have that committee of the whole, and we're discussing both of them, and say hypothetically we come up with an amount for human services, is that the same place where we're going to be discussing any proposed amendments to the total budget, either raising the total budget or lowering the total budget? Is that going to be in that same discussion? So, and then when we come out of the committee of the whole, we'd be voting on each of the articles?
I'm seeing head nods from David. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Ellen, I think you have that exactly right, that the goal is to talk about everything globally so that we can understand the budget and human services in full context, including how much human services funding, again, if any, the meeting determines would be appropriate. And then we'll come out and, following Robert's rules, deal with the budget article and the human services funding article through the formalities of the process, which will then get the numbers included as finally approved.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Ellen. Other questions on Article 8? Yes, Bob, you had a second one. Part 2.
Bob Ozer, but the part 2 is actually on Article 7.
Oh, great.
And I just wanted to follow up on Rachel Dissler's question, I think. If you're trying to compare, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's where I'm at with this. If one wanted to look at the general fund budget and wanted to compare the FY 24, 25, 26, 20, actuals to the proposed for 27, and since benefits have been added in 27, is it correct, if you wanted to do the math, to subtract Social Security, retirement, health insurance, life insurance, opt-out HSA, HSA expense, and opt-out and HSA payments from the current proposed budget in order to get a number which would compare to those prior years? Did I miss anything or put anything in there that I shouldn't have?
I think you might have missed the Vermont child care contribution. I didn't hear it, but maybe you didn't.
Pardon me. I think that was, someone can correct me on this, but I think that was a statute change.
Yes. But we've been expending there, yes. What I was going to say is that in the select board's backup materials for their meeting on January 13th, in the memo on the budget there is an addendum which compares all of the FY26 benefit costs to FY27. And what the staff did there was they reverse engineered them breaking them out by department so that people could see the increase from FY26 to FY27 for each benefit line. And the reason that we've tried to do it this way is so that everyone can see the full cost of each of the service centers. So hopefully moving forward in the future, this will be beneficial to really know like how much you're spending on an individual department. But it is a little bit of math to figure it out this year. So.
Thanks, John.
Yep.
And I'll also point out that in the packet, in the Finance Committee report, in the zone of page 22, 23, there are a bunch of other interesting comparisons on benefits and staffing. Any other questions on Article 8? Yes, please. Where's I've lost my thing?
Katie Wilson, District 8. Is there any additional public information available on the human services requests? Like, can we see what those requests look like? I know that some of that's private, but what is available publicly?
Yeah, David, is there anything you can share? I know there's some in the backups, but if you have anything additional.
No, I think certainly on the Human Services section of the town website, there's the complete list of allocation, the total requests, presents a complete historical perspective of what's happened over the years. But you can see the amount of the request and the amount of the grant that was provided.
Thanks, David. You can also see in the book, in the annual report, there are agency narratives starting on page 105, which give, it's different information, but it's a description of the services provided to Brattleboro and the region. Other questions on Article 8? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to Article 9. And if nobody objects, I'm going to bundle the next three together, but feel free to object if you like. Articles 9, 10, and 11 are to approve 3 municipal tax exemptions for real estate taxes for Brattleboro Post 5 American Legion Little League Field, the Family Garden Incorporated, and NECA. All 3 are for a period of 5 years, and otherwise the articles are symmetrical. Does anyone have questions about Articles 9, 10, or 11? Yes.
Ellen Schwartz, District 8. I think this is my last question.
As many as you like.
So I actually have 3 questions related to this. So in the finance report, I saw that the reason they have to request this is that they were previously denied tax exemption status from the listers. And my question is why and whether the criteria that the listers use to either deny or not, or provide, to offer or deny tax exempt status from the property tax are available somewhere. And then my second question is for each of these organizations, what is if we vote to give them the tax exempt status for another 5 years, what is the approximate dollar amount, knowing that it wouldn't be the same for each of the 5 years? And then the third part of the question is, are these the only 3 organizations in the town that are getting this or applying for this exemption, or are they the only 3 whose 5 years ends this year? And like next year, would there be some other organizations that would be, their 5-year time would be ending? If I'm not really explaining that very well, but
No, that
you're
makes
nodding
perfect
your
sense.
head.
Yes. Let's ask Jennifer. Yes.
Hi, Jennifer, Town Assessor. So your first question, the only one that I know that came to the listers was NECA. The others have been receiving a vote for a number of years prior to my coming to Brattleboro. They are the only 3 that applied, and there are no others that are receiving the exemption, so it's the only 3. And I'm not sure if I missed, oh, the dollar amount, we would have to come back with that number Saturday.
And the criteria, like why do some get it?
So when they come to the listers, there is criteria that's set by the state. There is a form called the Public, Pious, and Charitable Form. I'm not sure if I can quote the criteria, but you have to be a nonprofit, open to the public, and Bob, can you help me with the third one?
Essentially serving a public purpose and an indefinite
class
subject or portion of the public. But to, and I don't want to totally interrupt you, Jennifer, but if you want, the difference between these exemptions being voted upon is there are some exemptions under Title 32 of our state statutes that get voted upon at town meeting. There are others that are applied a test and are by law deemed to be exempt. And if they don't meet that test, there's an appeal process through court on that. But many times, and NECA is a good example of that, they decided to ask for the town to vote on it. So that's why these 3 are here, and these are the only 3 that are up on that 5-year cycle. So we try to keep all of the, I may have the 5 years wrong, but we try to keep all of them on the same rotation.
Town is allowed to choose 1 year and up to 5 years, but no more than 5. And we do have minutes of the listers for the time that it was brought to the listers, the NECA. I can look back and see if the other 2 also came. But that would be some digging. I could still do it.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yes?
Taking my glasses off. Hi, sorry, Tracy John, District 8. I don't think we have to say that anymore, but I'm remembering a town meeting maybe 2 years ago where NECA came with this same request, and someone please tell me if I'm getting this wrong, but that there was a procedure through the state to receive an exemption, and that they were either didn't maybe go through the process correctly. I remember Representative Kornheiser sort of explaining the process in the meeting. And so the approach to come to town meeting to ask for this exemption then meant that the town would actually absorb that amount of their taxes that were due, unlike if you received the exemption from the state of Vermont. And I believe we voted no at that meeting. I could have all of this wrong, so if someone remembers this differently, please let me know.
Jennifer's coming back.
Okay, thank you.
So when the town votes to exempt the education portion, that is when it is picked up through the local agreement tax. Currently, we have the veterans. There's 30,000 of qualified veterans that is exempt. That has been voted for the education portion that the town does pick up. And if you look at your tax bill, you'll see a little teeny tax amount for local agreement. If you vote, we have brought to, or it has been brought to representative town meeting to vote just the municipal portion, and they've been picking up the education portion themselves, the entities that have been granted the exemption. It is true that if the route to the list through the listers, or if it had to go to a court level, qualified for an exemption, they are exempt from both the municipal and the education, and the town does not have to pick up that portion. It's only when it's brought to the town for a town voted exemption, and that's the education portion. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Jennifer. And in this case, all three of these are just the municipal portion, so that part is not, we don't have to worry about that part here. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Tom.
Thank you. Tom Mosikowski. Did these organizations, these entities provide any narratives or descriptions of themselves in their work at all? In their properties?
When we put them on the warning, we had materials. I think we can make those available.
Okay. And does that maybe state the, like the legal organization or designation of the owners, like 501c4, 9, 3?
I think we may have to confer and look at the documents and get back to you on this.
Okay.
I'm not sure what we have as far as a formal application, but we can find that out and make that available.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, please.
Am I on? All representatives from these three organizations were present at that select board meeting to present narratives and justification. One individual's in the room now. The select board at the time felt that it was worth giving them the relief from the municipal tax for the services that they're providing for the town.
I'm just making a note, Tom. We'll follow up. Okay. Kate, we have an estimated number for you on the per 100K. It's sort of scrappy because but what we have is that $1 million in the budget is $82 in taxes on $100,000 of property. So if we were to raise the budget by $1 million and your house cost was valued at $200,000, your property taxes would increase by $164. But this has all been done on the fly. It's an estimate. So that's for right now, and we will do the math offline and follow up with you. Right. Yes, and John makes the excellent point that even at that point, some of this will remain an estimate, just the natures of how the actual tax rate and tax amounts will get determined.
Oh, yeah, it's working. At the Select Board's January 22nd meeting, in the backup materials are letters from each of the three organizations on these articles, and they describe their rationale for requesting this of the town. So I would encourage people to look at that packet from January 22nd, 2026.
Thank you, John. Other questions on Article 8? Yes. And I'm sorry, Articles 9 through 11 is what I actually meant.
It's procedural on those. Katie Wilson, is there only for saying yes, accept the whole amount, or is there a way to say we want a percentage of the amount? Like, what is allowed in that article for if we wanted to switch that up?
I think that's probably a question for Bob and Hannah.
Yeah, I'll have to look at that. I imagine the answer is yes, you could exempt up to a certain value, and then you'd apply the tax rate to that. Right now, it's warned as being the whole municipal portion of it. I will, if I change my mind on that or find I'm wrong, I'll certainly let you know on Saturday, if not before, okay?
Oh, the amounts. Okay, great. Yeah, do you want to? We have the amounts that the exemption, the amount of tax that would be exempted for each.
Yes, so these were the 2020, these were the fiscal year 26 taxes that were exempted from these properties. So depending on what the ultimate tax rate was for 27, it would be adjusted. But this would be the ballpark of what we're talking about for these. And that is for the Post 5 American Legion baseball field, $1,568. For the Family Garden, $4,147. And for NECA, $26,315.
Thanks, John. Other questions on Articles 9 through 11? Yes.
Hi, I'm Dave Spencer. I'm District 9. This is just a informational question for Saturday then. In looking ahead to having an open town meeting as opposed to a representative, where most of the representatives would have known where to go to get all this information to understand how Article 9, 10, 11 were generated and the rationale and the costs and all that sort of stuff. Would it be possible to, I guess, as you're reading the articles, explain, especially if it's a decision the select board's already made, why you made the decision, what's the impact to the town, why should the open town representatives care one way or the other? And I'm just thinking more information is probably needed for an open town meeting than what we're used to.
Thank you. I think that's a wise idea. Every article here has a motion that goes along with it that will be read by one of us in turn. And then the person who reads the motion or anyone else on the board is welcome to speak to that motion. So for some of the bigger ones, certainly when I read the motion for Article 7 on the entire budget, I will certainly give background. But I think we can all take that advice to heart and think about ways we can give some extra context. And it's also worth saying that even though this is the informational session, a lot of people will be here on Saturday who weren't here, and a lot of these questions will get asked, and that's entirely appropriate. And people may ask for the amounts, and now we're prepared with them, and we know where to find them. So there'll be a little redundancy, but we'll do our best to make sure all the info is out there so people can make the best possible decision. Other questions on 9 through 11? Seeing none, I'm going to move to Article 12, to elect 2 representatives to the Capital Grant Review Board for a term of 1 year, members to be nominated from the floor. Any questions on 12? David.
Has the Capital Grants Review Board done anything for the last 10 years?
Who would be the best person to answer that question? John says no, but still. Any other questions on Article 12? Okay, Gemma, I'm sorry.
Hi, Gemma Seymour, current member of the Capital Grants Review Board. We have done absolutely nothing in the past year. I was advised when last year I nominated myself to be a member that the Capital Grants Review Board did nothing. Although I'm happy to serve if any work needs to be done. It is my understanding that the recommendation of the Charter Review Commission is that the Capital Grants Review Board be eliminated. And given that there has been actually no work done in many years, I don't see any reason to necessarily oppose that, but there is a process that the Charter Review Commission will be going through in the future to enact that. So I would, if no one else would like to nominate me, I will again nominate myself from the floor to serve for the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like many people here will be nominating you to serve. Other questions on 12? Okay, let's move to 13. To see if the town will establish an advisory budget committee consisting of 5 members. And I'm going to bundle this with 14 because they're closely related. Article 14 is if the vote on Article 13 is in the affirmative, to see if the advisory budget committee shall be appointed by the select board and thereafter elected by ballot beginning on town meeting day 2027. Any questions on these 2 articles? Kate.
I actually know, Kate O'Connor, I actually know the answer to this question, but following up on the last speaker, or the speaker before Gemma or whatever, who was saying, could we get some more information? I'm wondering if you would explain to people why these 2 articles are on the town meeting warning.
Sure. I would happily give a quick explanation. Basically, the Finance Committee report you're reading now is the report of the Representative Town Meeting Finance Committee. Representative Town Meeting has gone away, so that committee no longer exists. There is a statutory provision for creating an advisory budget committee of an open town meeting. And in the statute, the size of the committee is 5. So Article 13 is step 1, create a new committee with a slightly different name intended to serve the old function. And we were advised to put it in at 5 members because that's the statute. I think it's likely that someone may on the floor amend it to 7 members, but that's up to the body at town meeting and of course totally all right by us. Article 14 is a little trickier and basically says if we establish this committee, well, we want to get members on this committee so that they can do their work on the upcoming budget season. The only ways to do that would be to have either a special, really, yeah, so I'm going to mangle this, but our intent here is, Nell, would you like to explain?
I feel less mangled. Essentially, the feeling is of the Finance Committee, and I believe of a significant portion of people in town, is that they would like the Finance Committee to be able to essentially remain a committee of the town meeting as opposed to a committee of the select board. Because we're moving to open town meeting and it can no longer be a committee of representative town meeting since that stopped existing, we essentially cannot create the committee and then have members elected to it from the floor in the same year. So it has to be created, and then for the purpose of getting those people in their roles and able to continue on with their good work as soon as they can, we in the select board are going to appoint them solely until next town meeting day, the Australian ballot vote that everyone usually does, first Tuesday in March. This is because to do to put this onto any other ballots that may be coming would incur an increased cost on the town. We had discussed in the March 10th select board meeting the potential of having this be added to the August election that will be coming, but it would have had to put on a separate ballot, been a lot of work for the town clerk and incur an additional cost in the town. So this process was done with a significant amount of conversation between board members and members of the current finance committee. If that doesn't make sense, there is more of this. People can watch the March 10th select board meeting where we talk about this, but essentially we are appointing them by select board this year so that they can get on with their work. And they will then be appointed by ballot come early 2028. Thank you. I mixed up calendar years and fiscal years.
Thanks, Nell. Other questions on 13 and 14? Bob, and then Dave, and then Gary.
So, first I apologize for this question. Bob Ozer. 24 VSA 1147 talks about the Advisory Budget Committee. And it says that if a municipality creates an Advisory Budget Committee, the committee shall evaluate the municipality's budget and make recommendations to the Select Board for the budget based on its findings. And this may be too fine of a point, but does that mean that the committee collaborates with the Select Board during the budget process to make those recommendations?
Thanks, Bob. I mean, I'll ask Bob and Hannah. I'm going to guess that the statute doesn't bind us to a particular procedure.
That's correct. The whole idea is that the Advisory Budget Committee is advising the Select Board with recommendations. So it can be a very collaborative working relationship. What Nell was talking about is actually in Title 17, which deals with local elections, as to you have to establish the committee first, and then at a subsequent meeting, typically they are elected by ballot unless the town votes to have them appointed by the Select Board. But because you can't do both at the same meeting, this talks about having them appointed until there is an upcoming vote, whether it's decided that it's not going to be in August, but whether it's November or more likely next March, as to whether or not that would be elected by ballot. So that's a decision the board will make at a later point.
Thanks, Bob. Yes, Isaac.
My understanding is that once the Charter Review Commission finishes its work, and once we have a revised charter, that revised charter could outlay a different process for the election or appointment of those Advisory Budget Committee or Finance Committee members. For instance, the town charter could be changed to say that open town meeting would elect those members. And my understanding is that the state statute, and correct me if I'm mistaken, town attorneys, but that the town charter is what is the governing policy, which would supersede whatever the state statute would normally have us do.
Thanks, Isaac. Bob, Hannah,
The more recent and more specific statute will control. So it's not just that it's the charter that controls. The charter itself is a piece of legislation, but it's the more specific and more recent will control. So to answer, to put it bluntly, yes, if the Charter Revision Commission came up with a different mechanism for how Advisory Budget Committee members would be elected, and that's passed by the legislature, then in my view, that would control over the state statute.
Thanks, Bob. Yes.
I would only just add that it's worth noting that this past fall, or maybe summer, the Finance Committee had been asked by the Charter Revision Commission how they would like to have their members appointed. Here's insider knowledge from the ex-Finance Committee clerk. We wanted Australian ballot at the time, not to behold any other future Advisory Budget Committee members to agree with that, but it is in line with what the Finance Committee had been asked about and stated they'd prefer.
Thank you, Nell. Other questions? Yes, please.
Judy Davidson. I'm just curious about, since the Finance Committee from RTM has done such a great job for years making recommendations and really studying the budget, I wonder if the Select Board intends to ask the current members of the Finance Committee if they would like to serve on the Budget Advisory Committee.
Thanks, Judy. That's certainly what I've had discussed in my conversations with the Finance Committee. I think the intent of the board is to patch something together for this year that will allow the Finance Committee to keep doing the work it's doing in the form they want to do it. The steps we take to get there are going to be a little weird because our form of government just changed, but that's the intent, absolutely. Other questions? Yes, David and then Gary.
So Dave Spencer again from District 9. Just wanted to thank Oscar and Nell for the explanation of Articles 13 and 14. That's exactly what I was talking about earlier, about filling out more of what the rationale was, what the intent is. I'll apologize in advance to you all because it'll probably make the meeting longer on Saturday because you'll get a lot of clarification questions about your explanation, but I think in the end, you get a constituency that actually knows what they're voting for then and feels a little more confident about what you're presenting. So, thanks.
Thanks, Dave. I agree with you. Gary.
Gary Stroud, District 8. So I guess, Nell, you answered my question, I guess. Just looking on there, also with the Board of Trustees, also at the Brooks Memorial Library, how they're appointed by the people there, they just bring that in. So pretty much everyone's decided to do an Australian ballot. My question, I guess, in legal terms, and other towns, what is the average amount of on the finance, how can it be held? How many people can be on a finance committee? And how does that work?
Thanks, Gary. Hannah, Bob?
5 unless they vote otherwise. I don't have any statistics on how many towns use this or how many deviate from that number.
And is there any other regular committee that they had previously before with finance, or?
I mean, towns can create other committees through charter, so
Okay.
I don't have an exact answer for how many are following this statutory process specifically as opposed to something else through their charter. And I can try and look into that, but I don't know that that information is readily available anywhere.
Right, and that way you'll have an idea of what the term limit is for the advisory for others who might want to be on that also and run it. And also recommendation too, as others said, people who were previously on there, if I don't know how that's going to go in order, if you want to recommend, like you do with the trustees for the library on there as well also, along with the ballot, so that they would have that chance because they've been pretty much on point. Thank you.
Can we just clarify that?
Yes, please.
The default is 1 year under the statute, and again, that's something that we can change through the charter, but under the statutory guidelines, I think all of the positions in that section are 1-year appointments.
I don't think that we have discussed term limits in terms of a number of years that a person can serve on the finance committee and then is not able to after that. Like Hannah said, each election cycle would be for 1 year. We've had some people that have served on the finance committee for a number of years. I don't think we as a town are in a position to essentially say we don't want you to serve anymore, like 7 years you're out type of thing. I don't think we have enough people lining up to do that work to say that, nor do I think there necessarily is any reason to impose a term limit. Generally, as it had been for representative town meeting, the chair of the committee would assemble what the slate would be to be read out at the meeting, and that gives current members the opportunity to get their names on it. I believe that it would be similar, for example, for the select board appointments. We've been in conversation with the chair, Millicent Cooley, of the current finance committee, and she has been in contact with current members of finance committee and other people who had expressed interest in joining. So I recognize that it could be viewed as hard to break into if you don't know the right people to talk to about it. When the finance committee in the summer had discussed this amongst ourselves, there had been the discussion of essentially just like consent to go onto the ballot the same way that you do for representative, that you had to get onto the ballot for being a representative town meeting member. So I believe it would give anyone the option to put their names on the ballot. That had been what had been discussed. But there's a bit more administrative stuff to get worked out there.
Sorry, Gary, if you have a follow-up, could you come to the mic so we can all hear you?
I didn't know, because Normally, the process for finance committees, like you get interviewed with the select board.
It's
Correct.
actually a little different because the old finance committee was always appointed at town meeting. So people would
Okay.
nominate on the floor at town meeting and then the body would vote.
Right, so now OTM, since you're doing a vote, I think there was a process mentioned about interviewing and asking people why. I mean, it's a whole different process on how it goes. in that.
It'll be a little different just for this year, and then for years going forward, they will be elected by Australian ballot on town meeting day at the ballot box. And of course, all of this is likely to be overwritten by actual charter changes sometime in the next 12 months.
Okay, so the application that's on the town website is null and void, basically? You don't use that anymore now?
We never did for the finance committee because that wasn't a select board committee, that was an RTM committee.
RTM, right.
But yeah.
Okay. All right, that was a question that I was just curious about
Yeah.
and how long it was going to be, but I appreciate
Right.
that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Gary.
So just for this year, I don't, okay. For this year, essentially, the select board has been in communication with the chair, and there will kind of be a slate prepared by the Millicent Cooley. And so if people are interested in that, I would get in touch with her. And there are some people who are current finance committee members in the audience tonight, too.
Thanks, Nell. Any other questions on 13 and 14? Yes, sir.
Ken McCaffrey. I was going to ask this earlier, but then I figured from the conversation I kind of figured it out. But now I'm back to not sure. My question is very simple. What is the purpose of the advisory committee? Is it to just help because more people helps out, or does it have a watchdog function?
Thank you. That's a great question. The short answer is that historically, it's been more in the independent third-party analysis watchdog zone. The Finance Committee report, which I think is in the packet, was prepared as an independent project. The Select Board didn't contribute to it, so it's more in that zone. There's certainly opportunities for the Finance Committee and the Select Board to work together in different ways, and we might explore some of those. But the baseline, I think the baseline work for the new committee will be a report like this done in the same style and with the same sort of outside analysis. Yes?
This year, the Finance Committee had done some different work and released some preliminary budget recommendations or a summary of the previous year's recommendations earlier before just doing the report for a town meeting. So I won't assume the intent of future members of this new Budget Advisory Committee if it gets established. But my experience having been on the past year's committee was that there was an intention to try to revisit, reiterate, and start the work earlier to allow for more collaboration in the budget process as opposed to just an analysis and potential critique of it in February.
Thanks, Nell. Any other questions on 13 and 14? Okay, let's move to Article 15, which is to elect 3 trustees for the Brooks Memorial Library to serve 3 years and 1 year to fill a 1-year unexpired term, and to ratify a temporary appointment to fulfill the remainder of an unexpired term, and then I'll leave the names off for you to read. Any questions on Article 15? Okay, seeing none, I'll move to 16. To see if the annual town meeting shall hereafter start on the Sunday preceding the first Tuesday in March for the transaction of any business not involving voting by Australian ballot or voting required by law to be by ballot. And I will just frame this one, since it contains the trigger words Australian ballot, and say that the only function, as I understand it, of this article is to set the date of the open town meeting, which will be the Sunday before regular town meeting day. The purpose of having it on the Sunday before is that the Tuesday is traditionally a really difficult day for people to come to a full town meeting on, so we want to have it on the weekend. I believe there was some specific conflict with the Saturday. but it's not leaping to mind.
It's more expensive to use the space on a Saturday, apparently.
TV, my understanding was BCTV was
Let's-
covering other towns as well.
Thank you. Let's ask Hillary. Thank you, Hillary. Yay.
Hillary Francis, Town Clerk. So doing it on Sunday is actually slightly more expensive because of the union contracts that the school has with their maintenance team to work on a Sunday. The Saturday before town meeting is the last day of the basketball season, and so they can't guarantee that we have the gym on the Saturday. They can guarantee that we would have it on a Sunday. Doing it on a Monday or a Tuesday is logistically really challenging for both the town clerk's office and BCTV, and so we requested that we do it on the Sunday or Saturday, but if we did it on a Saturday, it would not be able to be in the high school gym.
Thank you, Hillary.
You're welcome.
And the final bit of context there is that the Australian ballot, required by law to be on ballot language there, is just to exempt certain things that, bonds, et cetera, that must be voted on town meeting day at the ballot box. But the design of this article is to have a normal open town meeting the Sunday before and do all the open town meeting day things there. Questions on 16? Aaron?
Aaron Smith. So if say we pass having town meeting on a Sunday, what happens when it doesn't end on Sunday? Because traditionally we've done it on Saturday, and if it rolled over, it went into Sunday. So what would that mean?
That's a great question for Hillary.
So ultimately, it would be up to the body, but our assumption is that it would be recessed to the following Sunday, which would mean that the high school is setting up and breaking down and setting up and breaking down, but we would be guaranteed the gym both Sundays.
Great, thank you, Hillary.
I'll sit here.
Yes, Frick.
Frick Sprite, District 9. I believe there's also some statutory requirement that it has to be before, and I don't really understand why, but, and that's part of the reason why we're not having it on a traditional Saturday and possibly Sunday after town meeting day. Is that correct?
Right. Well, yes, please, Hillary.
Yeah, statutorily, it has to be within 3 days before town meeting day, unless the charter states otherwise. So that might be something that the Charter Review Commission discusses going forward. But certainly for the next year and until we have charter changes, it would have to be the Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday of town meeting day.
Thank you, Hillary.
Before you walk away, does that not conflict if the scenario that Aaron brought up, should we not basically adjourn and having finished all the business on Sunday, February 28th, would moving it to the next weekend not conflict with this statutory requirement?
It's being recessed to a date and time certain. It's an extension of that meeting. And so the meeting already started.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Isaac, did you have a question?
Same question.
Great, thank you. Other questions on 16? Yes, in the black?
Hi, Arlen Manning. Just my question on that, is this issue with the basketball on Saturday only next year, or is that continually every year, so it's going to constantly be an issue?
Yes, it is every year, says John. Dave?
This is Dave Spencer again. So is it possible on Saturday's meeting to put a motion in place to
move the date earlier so we plan on having a long meeting? Or, in other words, like the week earlier, the Sunday before the Sunday, or however that works from the logistics perspective. Is that an option for Saturday, or is this just, we like Sunday, we don't like Sunday?
Sorry, are you asking about moving the basketball or moving the?
If only we could have March Madness in February. The article. When we vote on the article, it's that Sunday, yes or no, thank you very much? Or is it?
Oh, could you amend it?
Could we make it the Sunday before the Sunday, or are there modifications?
I suspect you could amend it, but by statute, the only days available are town meeting day and the 3 days before town meeting day.
Okay, that's helpful to know.
Unless it's in the charter.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's going to be a situation where we essentially attempt to muddle through this year, and then the Charter Revision Commission is restarting their work in May. Is it May 14th, Kate, your next meeting? Yep. So I believe that they hope to finish their recommendations and put forward a new charter to be voted on for the town. So it could be a messy logistical situation for this next February 2027, but hopefully we would have a charter change that could adjust that. And because in addition to what Oscar said about us only having the 3 days, I would assume that the issue with the Saturday basketball conflict would affect the weekends prior to that in February as well.
Thanks, Nell. Other questions on 16? Frick. And if I'm missing someone who's had their hand up, just yell at me.
Not to beat a dead horse, but if it's an issue of the charter, our charter does mention town meeting at a later date. So is it absolutely certain that we can't do OTM on the date that our charter allows us to do RTM?
Hannah says, yes, it is absolutely certain. That is the advice we're being given by the town attorneys.
Specifically says that RTM is scheduled for that date, not the annual meeting generally.
I continue to be confused as to, besides who's allowed to go, what the difference is between the two. But
RTM is defined in the charter specifically as a town meeting of the elected representatives. So.
I understand that, but anyways, whatever.
Thank you. Yes. Yes. In the...
Hi, thanks. Christine Lined. Wondering if other venues for town meeting have been explored and where else we could hold it if Saturday works out better for everybody.
I shall ask Hillary.
So yes, the town manager's office and town clerk's office have both explored other options. Some of them are costly, some of them are unavailable, some of them have difficulty with seating, and a variety of things. The high school has proven to be our best option, both in terms of thinking about tax dollars being spent, as well as logistically. If we had to, we could certainly explore other options, and depending on how many people show up, we might have to explore other options or explore multiple overflow rooms going forward, but we're sort of limited. It has to be held in the town of Brattleboro, so we're limited with what our options are.
Thank you, Hillary. Gemma.
Gemma Seymour, don't think this is necessarily directly applicable to this article, but it doesn't really seem like there's a better place to ask this question.
Ask away.
And that is that with representative town meeting and with the select board and with our committee meetings, we have the concept of a quorum. And I am wondering how that applies to open town meeting. How do we justify the legitimacy of an open town meeting if only a very small number of people show up? So I'm wondering, is there anywhere in Vermont law that specifies that we must have a certain number of people? Thank you.
Thanks, Gemma. Lawyers and/or Hillary?
No.
So if we get to Article 16 and there's 10 people left, those 10 people decide Article 16. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's pretty wild. Yes, David.
But there are towns in Massachusetts that have town meeting and provide that a certain minimum number of people need to attend in order for the meeting to continue, which serves as a form of a quorum requirement, and Charter Revision Commission might want to consider whether that sort of a minimum number of attendees is an appropriate requirement to impose when the Charter Revision work is going on.
Thanks, David.
Just that concerned parties lobby the Charter Revision Commission about that, if
Good.
they would like to see a quorum.
Thanks, Nell. Yes, please.
Timothy Belknap, District 9. Had more of a general question along the lines of what Gemma's getting at. With the representative town meeting, each member represented, 64 people in town. Is there the possibility of calling a roll call vote at the open town meeting? And on the opposite side of that coin, is there the possibility of doing paper ballots? Thank you.
David?
There won't be roll call voting, but we do have arrangements in place in case there would be paper ballots. So everybody's going to get a packet of papers, all different colors. And if we need to have paper ballot, there'll be instructions for how to work your way through that packet and to vote.
And David, can you give a little more info on what would it look like if we need it? What would happen for us to need paper ballots?
I'm still doing my preparation
Okay.
for town meeting come Saturday, but I think that there's a certain number of people who request paper ballot. I think, if I recall correctly, that it's a majority under Robert's rules, but it's 7 under state statute, and it's 3 in the charter. And I think the 3 in the charter relates to representative town meeting, but I'm not positive. But there'll be a certain number of people who need to request paper ballot.
And the reason...
And I'll know on Saturday.
And is it correct to say that the reason there can't be a roll call vote is that there's no roll? There's no list of members to call?
Well, the town clerk will be checking people in, but it's not like we have a roll of the elected representatives. We have, how many registered voters, Hillary? 9,000 registered voters, and we're not going to be reading the 9,000 person list.
Great, thanks, David. Yes, Timothy.
Timothy Belknap, District 9, once again. Hillary, just one quick question. The latches, have we considered that?
We have. Do I remember exactly why they didn't work? I don't. But I do remember that we explored it and it was not an option.
Thanks, Hillary. Randy.
Hi, Randy Blodgett. Just a logistical question. A, how many people can you sit? And with the overflow room you have, how is that going to work so far as that group of people interacting with the moderator and the other people in the main room?
Thanks, Randy.
David Gartenstein, town meeting moderator. We have seating in the main gym for about 850 people. There'll be a section of the bleachers that will be roped off for people who are not voters of the town, and there'll be registration, voter registration, on Saturday in case people come and they're not registered to vote yet. If we exceed 850, which seems unlikely, seating, then we would probably first be ushering the people out of the non-voter section and then seating voters there and moving the non-voters into the BAMS gym. And there's going to be a Zoom link that BCTV will be maintaining that will allow for both audio and video connection between the BUHS gym and the BAMS gym. Also, if we fill up the last piece of the bleachers with voters, we also have the ability to have standing room in the back of the gym. So probably we don't need to have voters in the BAMS gym overflow room until we have about 920 people, 925 people voting in the BUHS gym. If we exceed 925 people in the BUHS gym, we have the BAMS gym as an overflow room for voters, and we have 400 person capacity, about 450 person capacity in the BAMS gym, and we have staffing available, thank you, Sue Fillion, to serve as a facilitator in that room to make sure that people who are raising their hands get recognized, and we'll work out making sure that everybody who wants to speak gets to do so, even if we're working to the overflow room. And voting will have to be, we'll be working out a mechanism for ensuring that we're toting the votes from both rooms. It'd be one thing if there's a voice vote, if there's a question about division, then we'll be counting in both rooms. If there's ballots in both rooms, they'll be collected in both rooms. They'll be brought back to the town clerk for counting.
Thanks, David. I think it's actually really good that we're talking about all this logistical info, and it is helpful. I do think I've led us stray a little bit from actual Article 16, which is about setting the day of upcoming town meetings. So I'd like to pull us back to that and see if there are any other questions about Article 16. Yes.
Elizabeth Pittman, District 8. So what happens if there's seriously inclement weather on the date that we set?
That's a good question.
I mean, if we're moving it even earlier than...
Thank you for the question, Bob.
Happen in other towns, and what typically happens is if one or two people make it in, they can move to adjourn to a specific date and time. There have been on town meeting days major snowstorms over the years where that process has been employed. Very rarely, but it does happen.
But it wouldn't be possible to set a date that's after town meeting day, the way I see.
Correct. Once you have the town meeting date set, which is either the first Tuesday in March or the 3 preceding days, then you would have to commence that meeting on that day and move to adjourn that to another day when the weather's not so inclement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions on Article 16? Seeing none, I'll move to Article 17, which we should discuss, although the Select Board doesn't have a motion here. Article 17 is to transact any other business that may lawfully come before the meeting, and this is other business. This is the place where people can make non-binding motions, essentially, from the floor. And David, could I ask you to explain a little bit about how that works and what that means?
If you want to make a non-binding motion, it's got to be non-binding because it's not warned under other business. You should have a written copy of the motion with you. try to get it to us before town meeting day as well if possible. And we'll call on people to make their motions under other business until somebody makes a motion to adjourn that gets adopted.
Thanks, David. So, questions about Article 17? I'm not seeing any, which leads me to think that we may bring the informational... Neil, yes. Yeah, good idea.
Hi, I'm Neil Manders from the original District 7. It has sort of been semi-brought up that if you have two different rooms, you have to use a Zoom to get back and forth in between each other. I'm wondering that if there is any way that the Select Board can, over the next year or so, begin to look at bringing the whole thing into remote attendance to the town meeting. I've spent a considerable amount of my time trying to work with you folks on the town board, and unfortunately, I can't be there on Saturday. The schedule just worked out so that I cannot actually be physically there. I am on the road, probably on I-95, somewhere heading down towards North Carolina, and I'm more than willing to open up my phone and try to zoom in and offer some times of things as well. But there's a number of other people I've heard from around town who just can't physically be at that meeting. And I know that this goes back to the original ideas of representative town meeting, open town meeting versus Australian ballots. But if there's some way that we can somehow or other designate an individual or create a remote access to the meeting that's going on, I think that would be a great advantage to the town. So, thanks.
Thanks, Neil. Let me ask Bob or Hannah and/or Hillary.
I don't think there's any restriction against it, but I think the better question would be for Hillary on the logistics. I don't know how you would prove that someone's a registered voter if they're joining remotely.
I know I shouldn't have gone to sit down. Yeah, I think that's a valid question, Hannah. I don't know how we would do that. Right, it's not like a ballot where there's absentee voting and there's signing. And so I don't know, and I believe that when the open town meeting laws were updated, Bob and Hannah, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that representative town meeting was treated different than open town meeting, and open town meeting is not required or available to do hybrid. Is that correct?
I think that is correct. We would need, suffice it to say, we would need to not only check the dynamics between open meeting law and how to vote remotely. It calls into so many technological questions that while I think it's a good thing to talk about, my recollection is that we can't have annual town meeting be remote at this point, given the laws that we have. But
it's my understanding.
With the way the world is changing, it's certainly a conversation to bring up with legislators and to discuss. I just don't have the full answer on that tonight.
Thanks. Thanks, Neil. That's a good question. Gemma?
I just have one final question. Gemma Seymour, District 8, that was raised by what David Gartenstein said earlier. And that is that it's my understanding that because of Vermont's same-day voter registration law, that when someone turns up to the polls on the day of voting and registers on site, that their vote would be cast as a provisional vote, and then their actual eligibility would be determined after the fact. How would that work at an open town meeting? If someone is able to register on site, I don't see how the town clerk's office is going to be able to validate their actual eligibility to vote on site at town meeting. And so they would still have a right to cast a vote, but how are we going to distinguish between who's a provisional voter and who isn't? Thank you.
Thanks, Gemma. That's a good question that I'll ask to Hillary.
So on town meeting day, when somebody registers to vote, their ballot is not provisional. They are registered to vote. We can log right into the state system, make sure that they haven't already voted in another town, and they are attesting to the fact that everything under oath that they're putting on their voter registration form is accurate and true. And like I said, they're doing that under oath. And so it's not cast as a provisional ballot, it's cast as a ballot. And so town meeting day or open town meeting would be the same as a ballot vote. And just to go a little bit off of that, since we're talking about voter registration on town meeting day, just to plug in a reminder that youth voters are eligible to vote in open town meeting.
Yes.
So folks can register to vote and vote.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hillary.
Going back to the issue of whether you can vote the exemptions on those charitable organizations in whole or in part, the answer is yes, you can do it in part if it were amended to be that. But those are for any charitable organization that owns land that's used exclusively for the charitable purpose. So if there were an amendment to vote a portion of it, that could be, the amendment could be voted upon, and then the exemption would go from there. So just wanted to follow up while we had everybody here.
Thanks, Bob. Other questions? Yes, Heidi.
Heidi Fisher, District 7. In the interest of encouraging people to come on Saturday, what is being done to make sure the word is out and people are aware? Because it didn't feel like there was a lot of information out there about this meeting.
Thanks, Heidi. Well, John?
Well, we've warned the meeting. We've discussed it it's been mentioned at every select board meeting. It's been in the paper. We put a banner up on Main Street. We encourage all of you to tell your friends to come do their civic duty. And beyond that, I'm not, is anybody else aware of other communications that we've done? Social media posts, it's on the town website. Yeah, it's be great to get the word out.
Hillary put it on her wildly popular Hillary Francis Town Clerk Facebook page in a really, with a lot of other great links that showed you everything you needed for that day.
And I think the truth is, for this local politics stuff, a lot of it is word of mouth. So I'm sure we've all been talking to everyone we know, telling them to come, and I hope you'll all do the same. It would be good to get a great turnout at this first ever open town meeting. Dave and then Gary.
Actually, thanks for bringing that up, because something I've been thinking about when we did vote for open town meeting. I was thinking the paradigm now of getting the information out to the entire constituency has changed. You know, when you hire a representative, that representative is engaged, knows where to get the information, wants to get the information. That's what they've decided, you know, they've volunteered to do, they got elected to do. Now that we have all the constituency to consider, you also have to think about who doesn't have computers, who doesn't know where to go to the websites. I was going to bring this up earlier, but I think it's more of a next year's budget thing to consider. I liked the mailings you guys did when you were running for office. Isaac and Nell showed up at everybody's got a mailbox. Perhaps some sitting down with experts on the best way to reach everyone in town. And not just with the, hey, we're going to vote on the 11th, but also, here's what the articles are, here's what the articles mean, here's what we're trying to do. Because now that you have everybody voting one man, one vote, one person, one vote, excuse me, they all have to be informed. Every single one of them now. So This is one of those mulligans for next year, I would say, because it's going to involve an impact to the budget. Maybe some advanced planning where things have to start sooner also. So just some thoughts.
Great, thank you. I'm sure it's something that we'll be talking about when we are planning for next year's town meeting. Yes, Gary.
I guess my last thing is, to answer your question, I'm the town crier, so I get out there, we have a lot of meetings. Everybody gets out there, we know, we have stuff at the library, so the word is out there verbally from neighbor to, it's a huge network, we're like a whole big family here, so anything that goes on, the other one knows. My final Jeopardy question is that day gonna be BYOB? I'm just saying for people's health conscious taste, because a lot of people have to eat for this diabetes. I mean, for stretching, you know. And now that we have more people that are more inclusive, that are coming out, making these accommodations for them, and also other people for ADA accommodations, or for people with different lengths, to have that, you know, thought pattern to know and remember that. Is there something that's going to be presented or sent out before that? Because we know child care is taken out, which is great, but for other people that are in need of that, I don't know how you're going to set up the time for lunch or breaks and all that. Thank you.
We're going to do our best, and the challenge is compounded by the fact that we don't know how many people are going to go. So we're trying to plan for contingencies, but it's exactly. Yes, Randy? And at this point, if there are other just sort of general logistical questions, we can move beyond the articles and wrap up with those also.
Randy Blodgett, hey, publicity committee for next year, maybe look into, and I don't know what emails we have, what availability is there by state law, town charter law, to ask for emails when people are doing things with the town, so that we have a way to do an email blast. If we ever develop an app, we can send a push notification and reach people in a different, cheaper way. Doing it by mail, I'm not for. It's very, very expensive, and most of it ends up in the trash or recycling. But, you know, hey, we have how many trucks in the town? We can put banners on them as they drive around. We have a lot of options that don't cost us advertising fees, besides the papers, besides everything. So we have to think out of the box and use that. But have a committee, let them develop it, and start early.
Thanks, Randy. Other questions on 17 or general questions? Yes, sir. And then Andy.
Just, I think, a procedural question around 8 or 9, 10, 11. I know sometimes in the past, especially at select boards, we run slates. Is that something that they're going to try to plan to do this year to push everything through, or are they going to, articles stay separate?
Sorry, could you say that a little closer to the mic? Were you asking?
It's a procedural question around 9, 10, 11. I know in the past we've just done slates and passed things, but is each article definitely going to be voted individually, or are slates going to be created for, time?
Yeah, the way it's warned, it will be voted individually. Of course, the body can do various parliamentary things and combine and suspend rules and things like that. But as written, it would be 3 votes separately in a row. Other questions? Andy, of course, I'm sorry.
I was just curious if some of the same high school groups are going to be at town meeting on the 11th with coffee and things. We used to always get a request to sign up if we wanted to buy lunch and have it prepared, but I've not received anything of that nature. Does anyone know what some of the support, it's always been a great way to support high school groups and stuff. Has there been any communication on that? Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Hillary?
The high school QSA, which is the Queer Student Alliance, will be there with coffee, tea, and baked goods and snacks for sale. They're not doing lunch because it's hard with not knowing how many people and asking people to sign up in advance. I believe that there was talk of community members organizing a community potluck I don't know where that landed. I'm not sure if it's happening or any of the logistics of that. It's not something that the town is planning. So, yeah, there'll be a bake sale. Beyond that, I would say prepare to bring your lunch or go out to eat during that time, and keep your eyes out in case there is a community potluck that's being organized. Nell seems like she might know, maybe?
I know, the Daily Bear is, will be having baked goods that I will pick up from them, but they are donating those. The Daily Bear is a cafe here at the high school. Is there any other?
From my correspondence with the person who had been trying to organize the potluck, I believe that she needed at least 2 additional volunteers to help with the administrative tasks, and I don't believe she found them, so I wouldn't expect that to be happening.
Thank you.
Tailgating is possible in the parking lot if you
Certainly.
choose to do that. And
I've heard-
we can all walk around with plates and share our food. Just, you know, I think it's in the spirit of this is the first time we're doing this. So let's see how it goes. Be open, be curious, be neighborly.
Thanks, Amanda. And I think as someone who's been to these before, as many of you have, I would put some snacks in your car. I would bring a water bottle and be well prepared. Other questions?
I have a statement, Chair.
Oh, a statement.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I want to just really shout out our town clerk's office and all of the work that's gone into a really dynamic situation from election to this town meeting, and also our town manager's office and all of our staff that have really worked together to make this happen. I think it's going to be a great day on Saturday. Spread the word and get out and participate.
Thanks, Amanda. I think we all completely agree. And also shout out to all our staff and department heads who are here and barely got any questions. So, all right. I think seeing no other questions, we're going to wrap up our informational session. And I hope to see all of you and many more Saturday at the high school at 8:30. Thank you all.